Thanks for joining us. My name's Robin Smith. I'm with Sport Inclusion Australia, which is a national sporting organisation. Been in existence since the mid-80s, and I've almost been with that organisation that long, which is really sad. But I am passionate, love what I do. I guess we work with national sporting organisations and state sporting organisations to build the capacity to be inclusive with a focus on ability. We've been doing that, as I said, for a very long time, with many NSOs now taking responsibility for programs. We don't actually conduct events ourselves. We sort of work in the background to facilitate that, whatever it takes to get someone primarily or with a disability. Primarily, it started with an intellectual impairment, but I guess if a sport's fully inclusive, then they're inclusive of all marginalised groups. So, and been, as I said, involved for a long time, probably been out of touch with New South Wales for a little while. And in the last, probably the end of 2018, 2017, maybe, Sport Australia decided to get all the national sporting organisations representing disability together, to see what synergies there were, what was possible to actually go forward, have a bit of an industry sector. So we started that process, and Gary will talk a little bit more about. Three of us sort of got working together fairly closely, and formed a fairly strong alliance. But since then, the 9 organisations have formed the Australian Sporting Alliance for People with a Disability. And we meet monthly. We've got 4 working groups. Our purpose is to collaborate, advocate and facilitate inclusive sport and physical activity for people with a disability. And I guess the 4 working groups are government and advocacy, collaboration and shared services, pathways and participation, and research and innovation. I'm actually chairing the Alliance at the moment for the first 12 months and see how I go, I guess, or I'll be moved on for someone else. It's been probably a revelation to all of us in the area. It's certainly resonated with governments. We don't all share the exact same ideology with how it goes forward, but we certainly share the why. And the why is that we're trying to make the world a better place using sport for people with a disability. So we all share that. And that's a very strong passion. And so the benefits have been, and I was in Brisbane. I was just talking earlier to David and Gary and Nicole. I was in Brisbane yesterday with the Minister for Sport in Queensland, and he was just thrilled that there was one organisation that would be representing disability with some issues, broader issues like making sure that the NDIA sees sport as a key role going forward with plans. The National Disability Strategy, which was a 10-year plan, didn't have the word sport in it, and it finished up in June 2020. And so that whole 10-year plan didn't mention the word sport, and it's quite an extensive document. So the Australian Sporting Alliance for People with a Disability, ASAPD, wrote a submission to social services to ensure that sport and physical activity are at least visible in the next 10-year plan. And that means that when personnel within the NDIA or boards or whatever, if they're not directed, if they don't see, if sport and physical activity is not visible for people with a disability in those sort of plans, then, you know, we're really fighting an uphill battle. So bringing this together, it was just a revelation to meet David Burns. I'm sure you've all done that. And he was recommended to me by Murray Elborn, who I know is on the call. We met and we just talked about an opportunity to get together with key stakeholders in New South Wales to find out what you're doing. And David would lead that in the moment, but see what it is that we can do together. And if there are synergies and commonalities where we can meet or work together to make sure that we're not, I use the term recreating the wheel. So I guess the disability sporting sector for a long time have had so many little projects, really well-meaning people, and government initiatives and ILC grants and all of these things. And we don't actually come together and share and say, you know what, that didn't work, or this was fantastic. Do you want to expand on it? So I suppose coming together in New South Wales. You might be well ahead of the game and you don't need this sort of coming together, but we just thought it was a great opportunity to share. So I think that's enough, David, from me.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. And we've drafted a rough agenda, and we've got around 90 minutes. And I just wanted to thank you all for giving up your time. I know you're incredibly busy, but we thought, just a good opportunity, like Robin said, to get everybody together. And this might be something that we run once a month. It might be a bi-monthly, or you might not think there's any value in it, but just a great chance to share what we do, really. And that's the intention. And we were at the Sprinter Symposium, me and Paul, yesterday, and we heard you talk, Mick, and we thought you were very inspiring. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of there's a lot of fantastic organisations out there, and we're just one small part of the pie. But it's how can we work together more collectively, and and share what we do, really. So that's the intention. And so the next part of it is we wanted to kind of go around the grounds and give each organisation an opportunity to maybe just share for 3 minutes. And I'm the timekeeper, so I will keep you to time in terms of what you guys do, and if you've got any programs in play or any initiatives kind of that you want to share. So I'll time myself as well, so that's only fair. I might give myself an extra 30 seconds though. I'm joking. 1 sec. Okay, so yeah, David Burns. I've got a consultancy which takes up half my week, DB Consulting, where I consult to government and peak bodies, but the other half is collective leisure. So we are a social enterprise. We're certified by social traders, and our purpose is well-being without boundaries. So what that means is it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, you have the right to be a well-being. And we're on a mission to co-create inclusive, healthy communities through a systems approach. And we do that through a variety of pillars. So we have employment and training programs, well-being and coaching, disability services, adaptive sports, inclusion programs, and systems-wide health initiatives. We also have a views impact measuring platform. So we use that to measure all of our programs. So really we're providing to marginalised communities through services, opportunities and support. This week we've got 6 projects in play. So we've got a smash tennis program that's funded through Tennis New South Wales, where we've got participants rolled onto the program through the health district, and that's in its 10th week. We've got wellbeing programs, so we're in Bankstown Senior College delivering programs to refugee students. And we're actually on Saturday in Lake Macquarie delivering wellbeing programs to grieving children and parents through Feel the Magic charity. And yesterday we kicked off a sports mentoring program to get young people into the leisure industry. We had 28 young people from the Cold community in Auburn, so that's going to run for 30 weeks. But I suppose bringing it to today in terms of disability sports, we're actually a delivery partner for Special Olympics Australia, and we've got Liesl online, where we're going and delivering their New South Wales inclusive sports program. But we're a little bit different because we're using coaches from asylum seeker and refugee background that we've skilled up, trained, and they're in them skills. So that's full inclusion there. And another project that I'm personally involved in is I'm training someone who's blind to compete in the Cairns 2022 Ironman. So I finished the Ironman last week in Cairns. I struggled round, but next year I'll be on a tandem with somebody taking part. So he's using his NDIS plan to be able to engage collective leisure. So that's a little bit of information on us. That's 2 minutes 52, so that's not too bad. But I might just throw it over to Murray Elborn, if you will. Murray, just tell us a bit about Disability Sports Australia.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Robin, for the opportunity to talk. I'm the CEO of Disability Sports Australia, but I guess in relation to New South Wales, I was the Disability Inclusion Manager at Sport New South Wales for the previous kind of 4.5 to 5 years prior to this role, which I've been in for 7 months now. Have worked extensively in that New South Wales remit over the past few years and work with most of the people on this call. Disability Sports Australia have taken on board the Activate Inclusion Sports Days program as our primary delivery program in schools, delivering to what will be about 5,000 students with disabilities, both physical, sensory and intellectual disabilities this year. Our primary focus is physical disability. So we continue to work and deliver national championships for wheelchair rugby and wheelchair AFL. And our wheelchair rugby just happened on the Gold Coast, which was a real success, broadcast on KO Sports and through Foxtel. So I hope everyone might have had a chance to look at a game. And then we're working with the AFL to deliver the AFL Championship, wheelchair championships in Tasmania in October. The national program for Activate Inclusion, we just delivered our first day in Darwin yesterday, actually, which was a phenomenal success. And we'll deliver days in Tasmania in October and Victoria in November, and then working with South Australia, West Australia as well. And we deliver the program with Variety and Sport New South Wales, of where I used to work, in New South Wales. So we have 20 days in New South Wales. So this program was now a national level. We'll go back and deliver our second day in Darwin in September and our first day in Alice Springs in September. And the good part is we're working with all of the offices of sport and the state governments and local governments to be able to deliver that. So when we talk about, you know, national programs and maybe having up to 10,000 students with disabilities nationally, and at least 3,000 to 5,000 students in New South Wales, we do know that there's obviously a great opportunity to work in that participation space. And that's what we're talking to Sport Australia about as an independent body. And obviously through the ASAPD, which Robin mentioned, I chair the Participation and Pathways subcommittee as well. So they're doing, as Robin said, some really important work from an advocacy standpoint at a high level with governments to change policy and procedure and put a spotlight on what we're doing. So we really play in that mixed format of, you know, the grassroots programs at school level, and then the elite programs to deliver the national championships for the 2 wheelchair rugby programs and AFL programs. That's me.
Fantastic, Marie. 2 minutes 40, excellent. So just to clarify, when you've got 10 seconds to go, I'll just put my hand up so you know you've got 10 seconds left. Mick, I'll throw over to you, Mick Garnett. You just unmute, Mick.
Thanks, David, and good morning, everybody. Yes, so I'm the CEO of Wheelchair Sports New South Wales ACT. We're 60 years old this year, and we're the state sporting organisation for people with disabilities in New South Wales and the ACT for 8 sports and 4 programs. So our 8 sports include the big 5 wheelchair sports: wheelchair Aussie rules, wheelchair basketball, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair track and road, excuse me, and wheelchair tennis. We also do para-powerlifting, disability lawn bowls, and our newest sport, frame running, which is part of our para-athletics portfolio. So 8 sports, we do 4 programs, which include our Junior Wheelies program, our Her Sports program to grow participation for girls and women, a member of our committee of which Marita is on the call. We also do an athlete grant program and an equipment loan program to reduce those barriers to entry for people wanting to participate in wheelchair sport with us. That's who we are. We've had 106% growth in the last 12 months in membership and a 292% growth in juniors membership. I can talk more about that potentially later, but the real key there is we put some very clear marketing principles through our organisation. We turned it on its head 2.5 years ago. We acknowledged that the way that we were communicating and representing ourselves to the marketplace made no sense whatsoever, and we made it very difficult to get involved. And I think this is not only true of our organisation, but it's true of the sports sector in general, and particularly the disability sports sector. One of my earliest mentors said, assume no one gives a shit about what you do. And if you do that, and then you try and navigate our sector, it is an absolute nightmare to navigate. So we turned it on its head. We've been very clear with our pathways. We can absolutely get better, but we're determined to make sure that we pass the next door neighbour test, which is if you can't explain it to your next door neighbour, try again. We're also working with 15 other organisations to design and launch the Adaptive Sport and Recreation Hub. So it's an initiative of the major players in adaptive sport and recreation in New South Wales and the ACT. It's a new website launching in October with the backing of iCare, and that's designed to be the marketplace, be the place where those hundreds of wonderful providers of adaptive sport and recreation in New South Wales and the ACT can list their offers, and the hundreds of thousands of people that we know that want to get more active via adaptive sport and recreation can come to that marketplace and find their offers. So that includes all the major players across physical, sensory and intellectual disabilities, in addition to older Australians and those living with severe mental illness. So I can talk more about that later, David, but that's our summary.
Yeah, beautiful. Thanks, Mick. And yeah, really exciting about that marketplace you were talking about yesterday as well. So love you to talk a little bit more about that later. Diana Lawson from the Next Step Foundation. Just on mute, I think, Diane.
Thanks, David, and thanks everyone. And I guess, Robin, I'm one of those, represent one of those organisations that's a little person or a little group out there doing fabulous things, mostly at the largesse of corporate sponsorship and donations. So we pretty much don't operate on grants other than local council grants. So Next Step Foundation's been around for about 11 years. Our founder, Jose Bello, is a passionate former professional football player. Football equals soccer, football. And I guess our organisation is best summed up by identifying we're an intersection point between a commitment and passion to early learning and the role of early learning and the investment in early learning as being a potential trigger for greater development of children. A passion, obviously, for football in terms of football being a vehicle with which you can engage children. But also, I guess, an intersection in relation to overall child development and all abilities in terms of our focus. And we emerged out of an observation that was made through a mainstream football program that some children got left behind in terms of their ability to engage. Their family and other children in the family may have had the passion and the commitment to engage in the sport, but some children needed some extra support and some extra coaching. And so our curriculum and our approach emerged from that identified need through mainstream sport. At the moment, we offer two different programs. We offer a community program, which slowed down during the COVID because we had parents that didn't want to bring children into close proximity. That operates for 3.5 to 5-6-year-olds who are mostly preschool, but some just beyond. And we offer those coaching opportunities once a week within the community, and we've offered about 4 of those in New South Wales for quite some time. And then we've started a schools hub program a couple of years ago, and Liesl, hello, who was involved in that program with us. We took the program into schools because what we found is there are many children who are now appropriately being mainstreamed into school. And school principals have identified enormous challenges of how to work with those children within main school funding, but also mainstream activities and how we can engage young children in getting the benefits of sport through school, when again, if they just participate in mainstream, they feel left out and they fall behind. So we're committed to the benefits that sport brings to children at school and in their early learning and development. And our school hub program's now been operating for almost 3 years, and we're in 2 schools with a 3rd school coming on board later this year. So in the inner west, out at North Ryde, and at Waverley here in New South Wales. And I guess our passion, along with just getting out there and connecting with children and families, is about how we bring mainstream football into the inclusion project. There's lots of things happen around the mainstream football, but there's nothing coordinated. We've had a few almost almost successful programs. COVID got in the way of one of them that we were going to run with mainstream football, but that's part of our hope for growth. And thank you very much for inviting me today, David, because it's so fabulous to meet so many people who share the passion that we do about getting people engaged in sport and using the value of sport to build and grow capacity, particularly for us, our young children. So thanks very much. Thanks, David. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Diane. And I think what's coming across is that quite a few people know each other already who are on this call. So I might just jump over to James Boyer from the Department of Education.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. So my name's James. I work in the Department of Education in the school sport unit. We look after school sport in the 2,220 department schools in New South Wales. And I guess in terms of inclusion or specifically disability, we have two officers working in this space. Their title is a Disability Inclusion Officer. Many of you know them. That's Peter Cardy and Anthony Moyes. They're a recent appointment, so I think Peter has been working with us since the start of last year. And obviously with COVID, there was some restrictions there, but have made a lot of progress in the last 18 months. One of the things is just through communication. So we've got a database of 3,000 teachers who are the school's representative for students with disability in sport. And so that's our main point of communication. And then we sort of work down two streams. So we've got representative sport and we've got participation opportunities. So within representative sport, we're supporting teachers and parents through the classification process so that students can compete. And we also, this includes the information on our website as well as individual support for teachers and parents. We also then have, go to events and provide support at the regional and state level. That's mainly for athletics, cross country and swimming as the main events there. And then we run some targeted representative sport programs. We run boccia, which we've been doing for a number of years now. And we've just added 10-pin bowling as well as a competitive sport for students. The other stream is participation. And so here we have support for teachers. So Diana mentioned the challenges working particularly in mainstream. So support for teachers in how to include all students, and also, like I said, around the classification process. So that's the support. We also then have professional learning and resources, and we also run events. So we have multi-sport days, which we run across the state, where we work with the state sporting bodies to basically provide an opportunity for students to participate in a range of sports at a one-off day. This is also a really good opportunity to work with the teachers, and show them what is possible as well. And then we also have Come and Try Athletics days where students can participate in athletic events in a safe, friendly environment, in the hope that then they go back to school and will want to participate or have the skills to participate, the confidence to participate in their carnivals. Again, it's really another opportunity to speak to the teachers, particularly around classification and what adaptations they can make to make their lessons more inclusive as well. So it's kind of a little bit two-part everything, working with teachers and working with students. That's what we do at the school sport unit. So thank you, David.
Perfect timing, James. Well,
I rehearsed it. No.
Well rehearsed. And I might just jump over then to Special Olympics and Liesl. Are you there, Liesl?
Yep, I'm here.
Yes.
Thanks, David. Nice to meet everyone. Yes, there's some familiar faces. Paul, nice to see you again. It's been a while. Yeah, my name's Lisa. I've been at Special Olympics for just over a year. I came on board when Pierre Comas, he started a little bit before me when the organisation received a substantial grant from the federal government to run a pilot sport program in New South Wales. I don't want to say loose, but the main parameter was to run 200 programs in New South Wales schools. So I guess the benefit that came with that was that we could create something that we saw valuable, which is what we've been trying to do and it's moving along very nicely. Yes, we've been trying to get into a lot of schools, but we've also been doing a lot of other great things because we don't know if the funding will get renewed. So we want to leave a legacy for coaches, teachers to utilise. So we've developed a website, resources, and online training. The resources, we've had curriculum aligned and physical literacy aligned. The courses we're about to have aligned to NESA accredited so that they're going to have more value for teachers. The programs, we have 3 programs on offer so that schools can kind of move through a succession. And the third one, which we're really proud started this term, was the partnership with 7 NSOs through sporting schools. So that will allow schools to tap into regular funding so that they can run continuous programs and not only start off in our programs, which are small modified playing for all or the playing for life type games, and then move into sports specific environments. So yeah, they see that progression of skill, which is very important. So we want to continue developing that NSO partnerships. Yeah, it's very exciting. We've just received 2 ILC grants for Victoria and Queensland. So we've just appointed 2 staff to run that. We have I think they were like 200,000 each. So we've got a year worth of programs there, maybe 80 to 100 in each of those. Yeah, so things are moving along really nicely. Sean Douglas is also on the call. He's joined me. He was, we worked together at Sport Australia for 10 years together. That was my previous. I worked at sporting schools and AASC. So I have a background in participation, which is my passion. I love grassroots sport, and my other passion, I was a PE teacher, is teacher education. So, you know, I want to see more kids out there playing sport. I want to see more teachers feeling confident to take kids outside and be active with them, because I know that's a barrier that is a reason that they don't take them outside. So yeah, creating these courses is what we want to do more and more so we can build up their skills. And that's it. And Special Olympics, sorry, the organisation itself, we have 47 clubs nationally. We have regional, state, national and world pathways, and we offer 16 sports. It's an organisation that I guess has a big brand, but our registration numbers haven't really been growing over the last 10 years. So we're really hoping this school program starts to invigorate it from the youth up and start to build it into participation. Thank you.
Great.
Did I go over?
Yeah, you went a little bit over, but that's
Sorry,
okay.
I didn't see the hand.
It's all good stuff. And Sean and Douglas, I don't know, did you want to add anything to that? Just giving you the opportunity. No worries if not. Yeah.
I'll quickly use up the additional time that Lisa went over and give a short spiel, so that way it sort of, you know, evens out the time allocation. But just really excited to be in this space. As Lisa said, we sort of work together at Sport Australia. A lot of similar passions in terms of teacher education and lots of participation and growth in physical literacy. So really looking forward to helping Lisa get into more schools and spread physical activity opportunities and healthy habits to young kids with ID and ASD. So thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Okie dokie. What about over to Marita and City Community Tennis?
Thank you, David. So yes, I'm from City Community Tennis. I've worked there for 2 years, and I am the inclusion manager over there. We run a few inclusion programs for young people and adults with disabilities. Our main program is an adaptive tennis hub, which we run on a Saturday morning, which was originally a wheelchair tennis focused hub, but we've actually expanded it to include anyone with a disability that would like to play tennis. So originally we only had like 5 people playing tennis in that hub, and now we have up to 20 people turn up each Saturday with various disabilities: physical, blind, low vision, deaf, cerebral palsy, etc., etc. As well as that, we also run a wheelchair tennis coaching session on Fridays, and we've just got the ATP Cup grant from Tennis Australia to start a blind and low vision tennis program, as well as a deaf tennis program. We ran a Come and Try Day a few weeks ago for 15 people who had blind and low vision, and then we also ran recently one for people who identified as having Down syndrome or an intellectual disability. As well as that, each year we host the International Tennis Federation wheelchair tennis event. And we've also reached out to the Universal Tennis Ranking and started a adaptive tennis competition for any disability, anyone with a disability. So we ran that last month, and we had 8 juniors, and then we had 20 people who also turned up who are adults. And yeah, so that's what we do over at City Community Tennis.
Terrific, Marita. Thank you for that. Robin, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, could I just ask a question? Community tennis, is it how are you funded, or who do you come under?
Sorry, Robin. City Community Tennis has been around since the 1980s. It was originally Jensen's Tennis, and then now it's called City Community Tennis because it's gone from a lease now to a contract. So we manage the tennis courts for the City of Sydney. So we are a business, but we do get we do apply for some grants as well. So we get, and then a lot of our players do have NDIS plans, and so they use their NDIS funding for individual sessions, group sessions, as well as that. And we also run a mental health program as well, which has been going on since the 1980s, was formerly Buckhouse Australia, now Flourish Australia as well. So, and that's including other people with other disabilities as well because of the NDIS. So we've expanded that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Marita. I will jump over to Nicole from the Riding for the Disabled.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. So my name's Nicole. I have a couple of hats in the organisation. So I work with RDN New South Wales at the state level on coach training and with our registered training organisation. And I also work at a centre level delivering equine programs for people with disabilities. So the organisation as a whole in New South Wales has around 40 centres, and we're delivering programs in those centres. And the programs range from therapeutic riding, and we also have a mental health equine facilitated program as well. Some centres are also running carriage driving, and so there's a big variety of centre capacity, I guess, and program types that they're running. From a sport perspective, we also do mounted games and dressage competitions, and we also have, or annually we have a championship event for dressage, not only our RDA centre-based riders, but also associate riders, so riders that have their own horse out there in the community can come to our championships and compete based on the classification protocols that we have in place for the para-equestrian, and we also have now introduced sport inclusion Virtus classification as well. So the event covers all disabilities, and we've got something like 60 different classes for people to compete in, so that we've got a little bit of parity there as well. So that event this year will come back. It was off last year, obviously. I think from the organisation's point of view, we're kind of at this crossroads of change at the moment. So we've had a huge impact in terms of capacity based on volunteering and the drop in volunteering. We also have very specific needs in terms of our equipment, i.e. the horses, and also our skilled coaches and the availability of skilled coaches. So I think we're at the stage now where we obviously recognised a while ago what we needed to do. We're kind of getting to that stage of being able to implement some of the changes or, you know, opportunities for us to grow and provide that program a little bit broader. So I think we've got 40 centres, generally around 1,200 participants a year through the programs. The programs vary in length and size and time and all that sort of stuff, but demand is definitely there. I'm pretty sure we've got demand in every centre beyond our capacity at the moment. So our focus at the moment is capacity building.
Thanks, Nicole. Really interesting. And Gary Westbale, I think you have to jump off, so we'll throw over to you next.
Thanks, David, and hello, everybody. I was Deaf Sport Australia Chief Executive for 7 years, but have been transitioning out of that role over the last year or so. But as far as Deaf Sport's concerned, I'm now involved in setting up the Australian Deaf Games, which is happening in Lake Mac and Newcastle in April of next year, which will see 1,200 deaf and hard of hearing participants from Australia and New Zealand competing. But during the last 2 years, I've also been working with Sport Inclusion Australia, Blind Sport Australia and Deaf Sport Australia on a new collaboration. It commenced with funding from Sport Australia and Move It Oz under the Better Ageing and Participation programs, where the three organisations received funding. And now we've worked into a collaboration and partnership, which is now known as Inclusion Alliance. The organisation certainly very quickly saw a number of synergies and of how we're able to work together. And that's also maximised the returns and the benefits to the three organisations that people represent. And the synergies largely are about the three disabilities, which are invariably invisible. So the resources which we have developed, which include toolkits, videos, education modules, webinars, are about helping organisations understand about communication, working with our three cohorts and helping to ensure that when anybody walks through the front door of a club, it's a welcome environment, and there's no barriers. And certainly what we've been able to do over the last 2 years, in particular caused by COVID, I guess, but we do meet representatives of the three organisations, meet every Monday for 45 minutes and discuss how we're progressing, and how we're sort of progressing to developing the resources, but also looking at governance, promotion, and developing joint funding arrangements or funding grants. So it's working very, very well. Our 4 key messages, which a lot of you have already been talking about to a certain extent, is play your part, leave no one behind, sport has no boundaries, and a person-first philosophy. And it's about ensuring we develop and improve the capabilities and the capacity of NSOs, their members, the clubs, councils, and also we've got an MOU with Fitness Australia, where we're working with their clubs around Australia. So we have a great national footprint. We've been able to present to over 21 NSOs now, and all the way through down a number of local councils and the fitness industry. As far as my role with the Australian Deaf Games is concerned, is when I'm able to talk about setting up various venues in Newcastle, Lake Macquarie, I meet with council members, I meet with obviously people who are running small or SSOs or local clubs, and I'm able to then talk about the Inclusion Alliance philosophy, and they very much enjoy the one voice concept and the collaboration as seen between the three organisations. To such an extent, we'll be running various programs in the build up the Australian Deaf Games about deaf awareness, but also supporting it by way of our various resources under the Inclusion Alliance banner, generating obviously better returns for the people we represent. Other than that, that's where I'll finish it. Thank you.
GWB, excellent. Thank you very much. And who have we got left? We might go to Mark. We'll see you later, Gary. Thank you. We'll go to Mark from the Cerebral Palsy Alliance.
Thank you, David. Really good to see some familiar faces as well. So my background is an exercise physiologist by trade. I have 2 hats on today, so one from Cerebral Palsy angle, but also one from Exercise Sports Science Australia. So I currently volunteer my time in the New South Wales State Chapter. At Cerebral Palsy Alliance, I am currently a business transformation lead, but I have managed the health and wellbeing programs my previous roles. So I guess from a CPA perspective, we deliver therapy, health and wellbeing services, short and long-term accommodation, life skills programs to over 6,000 clients in New South Wales and the ACT. We have about 112 sites across that region, a registered training alliance, world-leading research institute, and have a big focus on making sure that we're providing our clients with every opportunity to access the best of what they can in the community. And I guess a challenge that we have faced over time is, I guess a good issue is there's so many options now for our clients to engage in physical activity and sport. We provide options from an exercise physiologist perspective. So we have 5 accessible gym facilities and a fully accessible hydrotherapy pool in New South Wales. We have a handful of sports coaches who provide a range of different opportunities around boccia, CP, football and swimming, but it's really our primary focus is to ensure that we can provide our clients with a range or suite of opportunities. And the challenge, I think, for this group is to target that allied health network that supports people living with disability, I believe, because I think there's such a strong relationship there. And we see that in our work with our clients, that our clients, their families rely so much on the advice of their allied health team. And a lot of those people internally at CPA, I'll be honest, don't really know what is available. And part of my role and my previous role was to educate and provide them with visibility of that fact. Again, we provide opportunities to improve people's health and wellbeing, but that's just a starting point. Our accessible gyms aren't necessarily always the first or best option for our clients. So I guess that's my interest in joining groups like this. We, like I said, do have some services in that sport realm, but in reality, we see ourselves as that real starting people use the word grassroots. We're before the grassroots almost, when people don't know how to start off with the grassroots, and they often seek support from their service providers. So, and that's why I said I'm also representing ESSA, or Exercise Sports Science Australia, because I have had lots of conversations with the CEO, Anita, and I know Murray, you've linked in as well. And I think there's a lot of moving pieces there, but there's still a lot of work to do to ensure professions like exercise physiologists, physios, etc., know all of the amazing work that you are doing, because I don't think in the majority they do.
Thanks, Mark. That was excellent. And Paul, from Collective Leisure, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, look, I might need 3 minutes. Just want to say hi to everyone and just say, coming at the end of this introduction, what an amazing group of organisations we have for the community that serve the community in that sporting sense. So I've worked in Club Grandstand prior to this for 8 years for a large RSL club in the West. So I've had exposure to some of the organisations, but not all. But also know from that experience at that grassroots level, the biggest challenge for that community that I was working for in the inner west of Sydney was just knowing where all the sporting clubs were. And so, Mick, the project you talked about the other day at Sprinter, I think is vital for this sector and sport in general, to provide that marketplace where people can see all these amazing products that are available transparently and easily, and not having to negotiate 10 different registration portals and different accounts and blah, 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 etc. And the various ways that each code poorly manages that registration process as well, from my experience. So, but yeah, thanks for having me aboard, and a pleasure to be working with David just recently as participation manager, and looking forward to the months and years ahead. But thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Paul. And over to WeFlex and Tommy Trout. He's got the best name in the business. And yeah, over to you, Tommy.
Thank you, David. It's actually Tommy Napoleon Trout, believe it or not. Lovely to meet you all virtually. I'm absolutely honoured and blown away by the passion in this group. It's fitting that we're going last, considering that we're a startup who's brand new and haven't had the impact that all you guys have had so far. So lovely to be here. So WeFlex is an organisation that's a hopeful NDIS registered provider. So we're expecting to get that magic tick from the NDIA any day now. I had a full head of hair when I started that audit process, and here we are. And so really what we're looking to do is we have a passion and a belief that health and fitness is for everybody. And what we're looking to do is really create a pathway or a connector piece between the mainstream health and fitness industry, so your local gyms, and people living with disability in Australia. So we'd be utilising the NDIS to connect people with a disability to their gyms, utilising the NDIS, and what we're going to be doing is upskilling the personal trainer with a partnership with Fitness Australia and FitRec to give them the core modules and understanding on how to meet the unique needs of disability, and also working with the gyms on an accessibility project. So helping them become more accessible to these potential members as well. And most of this work is being done during the off-peak hours of that gym as well, which is a great piece around that. So that's where we're at. We've just started taking on new clients now. We're going to be doing a progressive rollout, mainly because we're in a position where we're brand new and we're just working out the kinks, getting the software and everything up online and getting it worked out. So we will be a sort of a tech solution. We're looking to do a major build over the next 1 or 2 years where we'll be able to support people, coordinate with personal trainers at local gyms, and really put together an amazing suite of content for personal trainers to learn how to meet the unique needs of different clients. And the important thing to note is everything that we do is co-designed by our stakeholders, people with disability, and and everything is co-designed essentially. So yeah, very excited to be here, and thank you very much for David for the invitation.
Thanks, Tommy. And for somebody personally that's worked in aquatic and leisure centres and gyms, for government and in the private sector, I think you could shoot a cannon in some of these gyms at certain times, Tommy. And I think your solution is going to really transform the industry. So I'm really excited to see your work over the next few years. Thank you, everybody. I think there's a real richness of organisations and abilities, and obviously we're all very passionate in this area. The next part is to talk about some of the challenges and opportunities within New South Wales. But I just wanted to give the group an opportunity. Did you want to ask any of us any questions from each of our little 3-minute little blurbs there? All okay? Yeah, Gary?
David. Oh, sorry, go for it, Gary.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, that a lot of us are doing some really good stuff and very passionate about exactly what we're doing. We obviously, at some stages, we just need, and this is really good about having these types of meetings, because obviously there's some duplications going on where we can actually maximise our returns by talking to each other and understanding what each other's doing. As I said earlier, we've got an MOU with the Fitness Australia about developing and supporting their clubs and also the personal trainers. So as when a deaf person walks through the front door, or a blind person, that they have the skills to make it a welcoming environment. The other thing I forgot to mention is that a number of our resources are now embedded into NSOs and university information guides, or Bowls Australia's Sporting Schools programs. Information guides now have information in there. So that we're very, very proud of all of that. It covers obviously the blind, deaf, and English impaired cohorts. So those things can also be used by other people here on this call, and we are certainly preparing an Inclusion Alliance website, which should go live very shortly. Yeah, thanks, David.
Thank you. And just to round that off, I will be doing some minutes from today, and that's one of the reasons why I've took the recording, because can't write that quickly, just to be able to give you guys your justice of to be able to really unpack the work that you do in your organizations, and I'll share that with everybody. And you're right, there may be some duplication of our programs, but the intention really is just to join up really and join up the sector a little bit and find out if there are any gaps and how we can really maybe work together to try and provide more support to those with people with disabilities. So anybody else? Nope. All good. Okay.
I think Diane,
oh, yeah.
David
Diane?
had a...
Yeah, my question was for James, and we have great success getting into schools when we have access to a known person, and I guess I'd be really interested in following you up at some stage, if you're available, to talk about how we might be able to access more schools with our program, where we have either friendly principals or friendly assistant principals who've reached out to us. We've been able to offer the program. but cold calling a school is not really an option, and getting our message out there when we're reasonably under-resourced is quite difficult. So if you're amenable, I'd like the opportunity to catch up at some stage to just see if there is some opportunity about communicating with schools about what we offer. Our program is free. It doesn't cost the school, other than their own personal investment, anything. We've usually been funded by local councils or by a grant or a donation of some sort. So we'd be really interested in following up if that's okay, James.
Sure thing. And I think perhaps there's an opportunity to put all of these resources, or the little hub that we've been talking about, which I missed the symposium yesterday. I had to look after my son was sick, so that was a real shame. I was looking forward to that, but it sounds like a lot of you guys were there. So yeah, maybe there is something we can put together as a bit of a newsletter or something. Do understand though that everybody who works with students wants to work with schools. And everybody has the same challenge of getting past the gatekeepers that are the ladies at the front desk.
Absolutely.
So we have a lot of people coming to us asking for this. So I guess we've got to be able to be, fair and equitable as well. So there are a few challenges with that, but definitely happy to have the conversation.
I'm a volunteer with primary ethics, so very familiar with the challenges to get into the subject. But no, I'd just be happy to have a conversation around if there are opportunities. That'd be great. Thanks, James.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we'll just move on to, if anybody's got any of the challenges or opportunities within New South Wales, and I'll cover a side note to that is, it's great to have everybody on this call, and you're all very busy. We do want to kind of get some tangible outcomes from it, because it's okay talking about stuff, but it'd be great to to get some actions and things from today. So does anybody want to kick off with any of the challenges or opportunities that they're finding at the moment within New South Wales? Robin.
It's not a challenge as much, but I think Murray and Gary would attest to the fact that as the ASAPD we meet and we talk about national challenges, that having a knowledge about what's happening at each of the states and territories. I met Mick only via the phone. Mick, this is the first time I've actually seen you, but listening to your stories when you started about the marketplace, that type of situation is something that maybe could be emulated in other states and territories. So it's and obviously Murray's come into Disability Sport Australia with a very successful model, and he's already sort of hit the ground running and delivering it. Also, James, I've been working really closely with Peter Cardy and the work he's doing online and websites regarding classification participation, classification eligibility. We've already piggybacked off stuff he did. Sport Inclusion Australia's done a similar thing, and it's education departments in each of the states and territories. How often do you get together, share? So I think Gary sort of mentioned it. It's how do we maximise, if New South Wales is doing something brilliantly, how do we maximise and share that? And conversely, get the information to you that might help. That didn't work, that did work. Have you thought about this? So I don't know whether there's an appetite for it. From me sitting here thinking it's exciting about the different things that are occurring, and how do we share it the best way?
Murray?
I agree with what Robin has said. I think in New South Wales, there's always been a healthy grassroots initiative and lots of participation at various levels. I think the challenge that I see in being in this market for the last 5 to 6 years is how do we get the participants who are engaging in all of our programs to a stage where they're actually consistently doing activity. And we've all got programs, and Mick's talked about his managed sports, which I'm familiar with. And Mick and Mark are members of Disability Sports Australia, and we work quite closely together in a lot of aspects. But I think it's important to understand what the duplication is, as we've talked about, and then what the outcomes are that we actually really want to achieve. If we want to achieve participation, I think that's already happening in many instances. If we want to achieve consistent participation into pathways, which is what we should be aiming for, in my opinion, then we need to think about those middle steps. There's a massive gap in the marketplace right now from the initial participation, the events that James does and that I do, and that the rest of you have done, to then take someone to a club space and have them participate in a mainstream club environment. And we're chipping away to try and educate clubs, but it's still a massive roadblock for people with the disability, all kinds of disabilities, sensory, intellectual and physical, to be able to go from a come and try day or initial grassroots program to then participate in a mainstream competition or league through community sport. So that's one gap. And then the second gap is exactly, I think Mark mentioned it, the ability to engage healthcare and disability and education so that they're more aware of the opportunities. And there's a referral pathway, which we're working on at Disability Sports Australia, to be able to sign agreements and then action, have a call to action for physios and occupational therapists and exercise physiologists to refer their clients with disabilities. But then what do we do with those clients once they're referred? So for me, they're the two big things where there is, I think, a lot of duplication at the beginning stage, but there's not that consistent plan through to, I guess, consistent activity or a real format for people to be consistent in a community sports environment. Something like community tennis has been fantastic, where they have the tennis courts, they have the programs, they work consistently through the training and then introduced to the pathways. But I'm not assured that every state sporting organisation that we work with, that we'd like programs with, has the capacity, the resources and the revenue to be able to establish what we want. So I think there's some discussion items that you can kind of take on board.
Wow, there's quite a lot in that, Murray, and really interesting what you talk about in terms of that systems approach, because everybody on this call today, we're all deliverers, right? Like you talking about government and public health and, you know, obviously the disability sector, and if we're really trying, it's that whole ecosystem, isn't it, that we're trying to work together on if we're really wanting to improve you know, the provision for people with disabilities. And just a question to the group is that, do we actually have a list of all providers in New South Wales around who have adaptive sports, delivered adaptive sports or sports for people with disabilities? Is there such a list?
Not yet, David, but there certainly will be. So we're collecting that at the moment, and all of those providers of adaptive sport and recreation will be listed on the hub, which launches in October.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Do you want to talk a bit more about that, Mick, in terms of what that'll be?
I can do. Robin's got a hand up.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask, Mick, is that going to include events that are run by School Sport as well? So School Sport New South Wales is running events for children with a disability. Is your marketplace going to include all activities which people with a disability participate, or only the ones that you're talking about?
The intention is to have every opportunity that is available in adaptive sport and recreation there, Robin. It is a good question, though, because I think language is very important. We sometimes talk about programs, and I get very confused when we're talking about programs, because when we talk about sport, we're just talking about sport. They're not programs, it's the delivery of sport. Now, other people run advocacy programs or education programs, and I think they're really important differentiations to make. And David, when you say we're all in the delivery of sport, even on this call, there's a diversity of delivery. So I think the definition, who's in advocacy, what are we trying to achieve with advocacy? Generally speaking, that's either upstream to government in terms of policy change and funding, or it's downstream to the NSO, SSO, NSOD, SSOD framework to have those who don't deliver adaptive sport and recreation to better understand the needs of people who want to get involved in that space. So that's advocacy. Then you've got education as well. Now, that's not a space that we're going to play in through the school system. For wheelchair sports, for example, we don't see necessarily an imperative to work with schools. We've set our organisation and our pathways up to be distinct from schools. That's our choice. And then you've got sports delivery, and I think there's benefit in us reinforcing the framework that Sport Australia have put forward about this NSO, NSOD, SSO, SSOD. Being really clear who owns what sport, and I think that clarity will help us a lot. To answer your question, Robin, I think we're going to learn something though as we go through the process, and we're not suggesting we've got it all right yet. So I can't answer your question sitting here today, but by October we'll know. Once we've gone through that process and tested, so the site's built, but now we're going out with each of the partners in New South Wales to test it, to sit alongside them and say, well, use it with me, plug in, where are you, what are you interested in? If you like, what are your impairments, if that's what you want to put in, and let's see what results you get. And we're in that phase now of test and learn before we go live in October. As to whether it extends to programs that I run in schools, I can't answer that as we sit here today, but we'll know in the next few months. Good question though, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mick. And language so important, I think, defining what we mean. So that was...
Well, even David, to that extent, we're very clear that we're now talking adaptive sport and recreation. So adaptive is the word. We have been working with a brand agency called Holzbosch, who are responsible for some of the biggest brands in Australia, including Woolworths. And we did a really great deep dive over many, many sessions with their team about language and a scan of the marketplace and what language is used by whom and all the rest of it. And of course, words like accessible, inclusive, disabilities, we went through all of those and poured through the general definition of each of them and the way that people perceive that language today. Now, a term like inclusion for us, in the research that we conducted, said that inclusion is far broader than adaptive. So in other words, inclusion not only includes those people who typically, say, those living with a disability, for example, but inclusion can mean LGBTQI+. It can mean CALD, it can mean ATSI, it can mean everything. So we went through and analysed each of the words and did some research, and it was wonderful work by Holzbosch. We ended up on the term adaptive being the right word for this space because it doesn't mean very much to anyone. So it's quite a bland, damp word at the moment, but it was certainly associated with some level of, like, it makes sense when you hear it that it's probably for someone that needs some adaptation. We're going to run a campaign, and it's a significant marketing campaign around this idea of adaptation, based on the idea that the most adaptive to change are the ones that survive. So we're going to turn adaptive sexy, and we're going to really go after it, and it's going to be aspirational, and you're going to want to be adaptive. And if anything, the timing's right. We've just come out of COVID, and we know that, everyone had to adapt. So the term for us very much, and we've shared this and had this multiple times through conversations, and Mark Liberatore, who's on the call, is part of our advisory committee. And so we've had this conversation amongst us that that's the word we're going with, and we'll galvanise people around that term. It takes the term, also the other advantage, it takes it away from the person. So instead of talking about the person, we're now talking about the sport or the active recreation activity. And what that means is that we, instead of having something that's now set up for people with disabilities, we've got adaptive sport and recreation, meaning all of those wonderful SSO in New South Wales now, who, like Netball New South Wales, Basketball New South Wales, Hockey New South Wales, who are working on walking versions of their sport for older Australians, they will all be listed on this now. Instead of it being something for someone with disabilities, it actually opens up that huge cohort of older Australians who want adapted versions of the sports they love. And in addition to that, of course, it opens up ex-servicemen and women as well, who severe mental illness, PTSD, those sorts of things. They won't respond to the word disability at all. And so we've taken the language away from person to the sport or the active recreation activity, and adaptive is our word.
Fantastic. Well, I've certainly learnt a lot just in that little blurb there, Mick, and I think you're going to really own the word adaptive, moving forward.
Yeah, we learnt a lot too, David, and it would only be to the extent to which we can get everyone to go together on this. And I met with Sport New South Wales during the week, and the suggestion on the table is, even though through the awards now, that we actually start to change that language. Instead of athlete with a disability, we look at adaptive sports athlete or something like that. It can only work if we go together on this, really. If we're going to make the term adaptive be aspirational and strength-based, then we've got to go together.
Yeah, cool. And Liesl or Mark, did you have your hand up there?
Yeah, Mark was. You go, Mark. I'll go.
Thank you. I'm just on the road, so hopefully it's not too noisy. But in terms of an opportunity, just throwing a statistic out there, 79% of people 10 to 16 living with a disability don't do enough physical activity. So to Murray's point, participation in these, sports and programs, whatever it's titled, is fantastic. But the ongoing participation, trying to meet that minimum requirement just for health, really, 30 to 60 minutes a day for that age bracket. 20% roughly are doing it and 80% aren't. So in terms of a tangible outcome, if we can increase the amount of people that maintain touch points of physical activity, we're going to reduce ongoing health-related complications and, the stress on the healthcare system. So I think is that achievable right now over the next 1 to 5 to 10 years? I think it is, but I think that's something that we should all be aspiring to, because it's pretty damning when you hear that.
Yeah, and with those physical activity guidelines, do any of the organisations on this call collect that data around their participants if they're meeting those guidelines?
I don't think so.
Mary?
So data collection is a massive gap in the adaptive for inclusion or disability space, where lots of people were running great opportunities and programs, but we weren't capturing any data around it. This year, when we took over from Sport New South Wales and delivering Activate Inclusion Sports Days, we implemented 2 really big key things. One was the expansion of our pre-day data survey. And instead of teachers filling it out with their kids, we actually put the survey online and put it into the permission note, so that they had to fill out the pre-day survey with their permission note, with their family or carer, before they actually were approved to go to an Activate Inclusion Day. That enabled us to capture data around disability, age, also a section called Can I Play, which basically said, do they want to play sport or do activities in community after the Activate Inclusion Day? And what have they done before the Activate Inclusion Day to get a baseline? So we got that data off the bat. And then when we're doing Activate Inclusion, we have now brought in a doctor of exercise physiology to be able to run a physical literacy station at the day. And so they're taking physical literacy data. And tomorrow I'm meeting with Sally, who's the Assistant Director of Physical Literacy at Sport Australia, to discuss what our findings are and establish the baseline for that. And then we work with Sydney University to be able to look at research opportunities from our Startup Kids program. So data is really key. And in talking to health professionals and building more opportunity for health referrals of people with disability, it's very important to be able to look at that data analysis. They want to be able to understand where things are at, what the baselines are. And so we've really taken that on board and been able to deliver that. And I think from the feedback we've gotten from different areas of Sport New South Wales, we're kind of the exception to the rule there. And just looking at data around the AusPlay data, there's one question which is very broad. And looking at what data's around at the moment that talks about baseline physical literacy for different disability types, physical, sensory, intellectual, is a real challenge. We've also looked at things like yoga programs within Activate Inclusion Sports Days for people with autism spectrum, and we see some really good results around the fact that during the yoga sessions, kids who have autism are often, their brain goes a million miles an hour. They have trouble focusing and taking on. We've seen some really good outcomes during the yoga sessions. So that's enabled us to go back to Sydney University and say, we'd actually really like to do a study on yoga and its effects for people with autism as an example. But that's a baseline stuff that we're kind of taking, and the data is so important to that.
Yeah.
Robin?
Yeah, look, in line with what Murray's talking about, we actually had the ASAPD had AusPlay represent or present yesterday about the questions, and the ASAPD, sorry for the acronym, but the new alliance has gone to the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Health Department to gain the questions in all national surveys, and the ABS, the census goes out in August, so we missed the boat for that one. But the National Disability Survey, basically, like Murray said, the question is just, it's a token question and it doesn't focus on anything. So to actually have anything meaningful, any empirical data to go and lobby or advocate for, we don't have that information. So, you know, asking one question often doesn't actually get to what it is. It seems more important in the census. And you know, someone, not you on the call, of course, but people argue, but it's really important to have a roof over your head and it's really important to have a job, but what you do in your leisure time, we don't care. So, you know, in terms of that quality of life, and we all represent that area, we represent that after school and on weekends, that the leisure, what we all are passionate about is not represented in the census. So I think it's something, David, that is a broader issue, and we probably all benefit from the study. So the ASAP has a research and innovation, and you know, Murray will obviously feed some of that information back in. So there are a group of researchers involved in that, and hopefully we can collate all of that material and then have a general sense of a general set of questions that are asked, that we get the data that we actually need.
Yeah, I think I'll come to you in a sec, Diane. I just wanted to just wrap that one up a little bit in terms of you know, 1 in 2 Australians have got a chronic disease, and we know that if a person with disability is that, I think that doubles. And if you think physical activity is like the golden thread to reducing chronic disease and stuff, you know, is there an opportunity to really look at those physical activity guidelines and like a standardized universal question? And I look at it from the facilities that local government provides, you know, and the operators who manage them. It's always about attendances, you know, whether it's swim lessons or, you know, in the gym, but we don't really look at how many times people are coming each week and how that is affecting their health and that social impact of communities. So I would love, you know, like a universal question that we could all be asking our participants around how often they're participating in sport, because I think that would provide some really good data. But then again, you might want the physical literacy question in there as well. So I suppose it's defining what we really want to better understand. Diane, over to you.
Yeah, one of the things, and agreeing with Murray in relation to the need for data, we've explored this over the 11 years, because our sample is quite small, because we're a small organisation. We know, for example, that about 30% of the children we enrol in our programs do go on to mainstream sport, and we form alliances with local clubs, and we make referrals for children to move from our supported program into, I'll use adapted there, make our adapted program to curriculum to, you know, to get into mainstream programs. But I think one of the other things that's really important about data, and someone mentioned it earlier, and that is about consistency. And I think if we're going to mount the case, and someone else said it earlier, that, you know, we're absolutely right that from a health professional, but also from a government investment perspective, evidence base is what drives investment at this point. And to make it really clear about the amount of impact that these programs have on children and their potential lives, I think we need to think big and actually look at consistency as a measure. So rather than the one-off events, we offer our programs for 8 to 10 weeks at a time, but again, that's limited because of funding and accessibility. Others will do theirs as one-day events because, again, or 2 days, because that's what they can afford. I think there's scope for us to really think big about what is the consistent effort going to deliver in terms of the ultimate outcomes that this is longitudinal stuff we're trying to do here, taking children from the age of 3.5, building a love of sport, building their capacity, following those children through into mainstream. We have a lovely story in our charity of recently of a young boy who started with us 11 years ago, George, and he's now a referee in football. He has autism spectrum. He played the sport. He engaged in the sport. The sport has now become his community. It's where he goes to as now growing into adult, where he is actually connected with community. So I do think there is some longitudinal stuff, not just about the health benefits, but those social benefits of actually engaging people for life in a community where they're committed to activity, I think would be a really exciting sort of longitudinal, growing that consistency approach as well, which would be great.
Yeah. We'll come over to you in a sec, Mick. Mark, did you have something you wanted to add? You there? Oh, over to you, Mick.
Thanks, David. And I was really interested in both of those comments, Diane, and also Murray. What I would say is if you said to me, you can go and get a pot of money and you can do an exercise to try and get us the data we need, what would you do? I would spend it within the framework that Sport Australia has set up. So there aren't that many SSODs in New South Wales. We've got Riding for the Disabled on the call. We've got Special Olympics Australia. I would estimate, I don't know the number, perhaps someone does, but are we talking about 30 or so? And that'd be maximum. Now, the one thing in terms of data, and I thoroughly agree with Murray, is what our end goal is together is regular activity. It's not one-off stuff. So therefore, the solution to that problem is not that difficult in concept. It is if you can get each of those SSODs, and we're talking about New South Wales at the moment, on a common platform, you've got the data. Now, it's not the rich data, Diane, you're talking about over time at all, and that's a worthwhile and virtuous idea. But if all we're looking to do is to suggest that, let's build a business case of the amount of people in adaptive sport and recreation in New South Wales, that's not an insurmountable problem. We've gone on to revolutionise sport as our database provider. I don't know whether Riding for the Disabled or Special Olympics or what other organisations are on, but we would freely give de-identified data from our database to contribute to a common cause like this. And if it meant that we threw some money at it, we needed to go to Sport Australia and said, we've got a shared platform we all want to use. That shared platform is the key to data. And so I would be interested to know from others what platforms they're on, but I think we could sort of bite off more than we can chew if we're talking about longitudinal studies and all that sort of stuff, which is virtuous, absolutely important work. But at a baseline, we could certainly get participation numbers for people in adaptive sport and recreation insofar as they're participating with SSODs, if we can get a common back end and have an agreement between ourselves that will provide de-identified data.
Thanks, Mick. Mark, did you want to say anything, or I saw your hand going up virtually? No. Robin?
Yeah, I guess that's true about people that are actually participating in those areas. I suppose what we also need to know is how many people with a disability are not participating, and the numbers and the ages and where they are and how we can activate, and why aren't they being involved? What is it that's not happening? So I totally agree that collecting data on a shared platform is the way to go, and I think Sport Australia is probably looking to do that on a national circumstance. They're trying with AusPlay, and I think there's scope there, but it's the people with the disability that we're not touching right now.
Thanks, Robin. Nicole?
Sorry, I was just giving a thumbs up to accessing data and trying to work out what is actually happening in all of our sports and putting it together so that we've got a bit of a picture. So absolutely agree. I think sometimes though, I wonder if the gap in regular participation comes back to capacity of coaches, and that area, that middle area of coaches, and whether or not that capacity of coaches is based on a volunteering portfolio or a paid coaching portfolio. So I guess that's another question to ask on whether or not people are, if there is a lack of possibility of participating because there isn't the coaches out there with the knowledge and skills to adapt their coaching, and whether or not that comes back to coaching or volunteering or paid coaching.
Thanks, Nicole. And I'll collate all these specific questions that we've got, because I think they're really, really good to ask ourselves. Liesl, you've been very patient there. Thank you.
Sorry, that's okay. I'll just quickly mention about data. That was something that we flagged on with the schools program straight away, is we got to capture data, because we were thinking about refunding, and it was like, well, we're going to have to show how this has created positive impact. So yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, data is so important. I guess this opportunity is for a question, and it's towards James, and Diane mentioned it before. You know, we're offering free programs, and whilst we are, we haven't, we've been moving along okay. We haven't had a massive targeted approach. I'm wondering, does a school sport unit have and I know you've supported us, and Peter has emailed out, but is there any way that maybe there'd be a termly newsletter that could go out to all schools that could collate opportunities for schools to tap into different organisations such as ourselves on the call with free opportunities? Because I know that there are those out there, and I know schools will only take on sports if they are free because they don't have the funding themselves. And we still have probably about 140 schools to get by mid next year. So yeah, I was just wondering, I can't remember what our conversations were in the past. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
And look, like I said to Diane, that there's a lot of information that wants to go to schools as well, and not just from external bodies, but from us, that we have programs across, not just in disabilities, but, you know, we've got huge programs across the sport unit that we want to communicate with schools as well, and they get overloaded with information about everything that is possible. So it is a challenge, not just for providers, but for us as well, to get cut through with the messaging. But like I said, but perhaps there is an opportunity. We do have a newsletter which goes out, I think twice a term. You know, it's a full newsletter. So to add other things in would, you know, I guess reduce the communication. But maybe there's something that Peter and Anthony can put just to their contacts, you know, that does have a summary or does direct people to other resources for different opportunities as well, and is a summary of that. Yeah, that's what I was sort of suggesting earlier on when I said, you know, maybe we can put everything in one place to make it easier.
Yeah, okay, all right.
But it's not just a challenge for you, it is a challenge for us as well. Definitely.
Yeah, sure.
And schools are busy places.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I definitely understand that.
Just conscious of time, we've got 4 minutes. I'll just jump over to Murray.
I just think what we're talking about is really relevant here, where you know, we're looking at the end solution, but also once the end solution's there, whatever that is, how do we advertise that effectively so that healthcare knows, teachers know, NDIS and community services know? So that's another thing I think we need to, you know, put into that discussion in the pipeline, because if we kind of put the horse before the cart and we build something great where everyone's engaged, how are we going to let people know what's that strategy? So Mick, I'd be interested to hear from your point of view. Obviously, you've worked really hard with those 15 partner organisations, and it seems like, you know, it's very thorough. What's the strategy to let everyone know in health, in education, in community, in government?
Yeah, thanks, Murray, and I can go through that in more detail one-on-one if you'd like, but we've got a 6-figure marketing budget behind this thing. It's not only, it'll include broadcast media to a certain extent. We will, so we'll have a sector engaged marketing plan. We will, and by that I mean the sports sector, but we'll also have a marketing plan by sector as well. So it'll be the biggest thing that's happened in adaptive sport and recreation in recent memory in terms of visibility. It will be the number one referral pathway for everyone in New South Wales and the ACT.
Very exciting. So,
David, may I just ask a quick question? And sorry to interrupt, and it is quick. I mean, this morning's meeting has been excellent, and it's stimulated my thinking as to why we don't have an equivalent of what you're doing, Robin, at a national level in New South Wales. Probably more specifically around the providers, I think, because that's where we operate as a provider rather than an advocate or an education organisation. So just by the by, it's, you know, I really enjoyed this morning. I think everyone's made an excellent contribution, and it stimulated my thinking as to seeing why don't we have an equivalent in New South Wales that we can then have a direct line through to you guys nationally and keep the conversation going.
Thanks for that, Mick. And I suppose that was the next part. We've got 2 minutes left, and I do want to finish on time because I want to respect everybody's time. But in terms of next steps, what does that look like for people? Does the rest of the group think this was valuable? Would you be open to another meeting in a month or 6 weeks time where maybe I could distribute the minutes and pick up some of those questions, them great questions that we've asked today, as maybe some starting points for another virtual think tank? A few nodding heads. If you don't think it is, like, please be honest, you know, because we are conscious of people's time. Bi-monthly. We could discuss the New South Wales of what the alliance looks like. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add that we've kind of missed off from today? We were going to talk a little bit about the COVID recovery, but I think the conversation was very good, so we kept it flowing. Get better engagement with schools, 6 to 8 weeks. So I think if I may, give me a week or so to pull the minutes together, and I'll distribute it to this group. This group was just, I suppose, through contacts that myself and Robin had. We obviously haven't. There's a much wider group, whether it's the sport and, you know, the governing bodies of sport, etc. So if there's anybody that you guys think would be you know, valuable to be added to this group, please send that through, and then we can maybe incorporate them onto the next virtual think tank for New South Wales. But I think on behalf of me and Robin, just like to say a big thank you to everybody for attending today. It's great to hear about all the work that you're doing. Very passionate people. You know, continue what you're doing, and yeah, wish you well over the next few weeks.
Thanks, everyone. It's been fantastic. So lovely to meet some of you.
Okay.
Thanks, David. Thanks,
See you all
Robin.
soon. Bye bye, guys. Thank you.